Have you ever felt like you've forgiven too many times? For people who never really appreciated it, they crossed your boundaries. They hurt you. And then they came back like nothing ever happened. And when you finally chose distance, when you chose to protect your dignity, they called you cold. They said you were holding a grudge. If that's ever happened to you, there's one thing I want you to hear. You're not too sensitive. You're protecting the most sacred part of yourself. Today, I want to share with you 8 powerful truths, the kind that might wake you up, might sting a little, but will absolutely help you reclaim something you may have lost along the way, your right to peace. But before we begin, let me ask you 3 things. Have you ever wondered why you keep forgiving, but they never change? Are you calling your silence kindness, while something inside you slowly breaks? And if today was your last chance to finally say enough, would you dare to say no? If even one of those questions hits something real inside you, this video is for you. I'd love to invite you to subscribe to this channel, not for the numbers, not for the algorithm, but because I truly believe the next videos will go even deeper. Stories, insights, and perspectives that will help you live a life that's strong without having to become hard. So let's keep walking this journey together, starting with 8 truths we all need to hear, but few are brave enough to say out loud. I want you to imagine this. You're sitting at a table with someone who hurt you. Maybe they lied to you. Maybe they betrayed your trust. Maybe they simply vanished when you needed them most, and then reappeared, smiling like nothing ever happened. And now, you're sitting there, pretending it's all okay, laughing politely, nodding at small talk. But inside, your chest is tight. Your breath is shallow. And there's this quiet, aching voice inside whispering, why am I still doing this? Have you ever felt that way? If you have, I want you to know something that took me years to fully understand, and even longer to practice with peace in my heart. Forgiveness does not mean continuation. You can forgive someone and still choose to walk away. Those are 2 completely separate things. But so often, we confuse them. Society tells us that if we've truly forgiven, then we should welcome the person back with open arms. Reconnect. Move on like nothing happened. That's not healing. That's erasure. I've spoken to so many people, women in their 60s, men in their 40s, parents in their 70s, who have carried the burden of confusion for years. They forgave someone, thinking that meant they had to keep enduring the same behavior, and when that person hurt them again, they blamed themselves. But here's the truth. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Continuation is something the other person must earn. Forgiveness is about release. It's the act of saying, I will no longer carry the bitterness, the resentment, the poisonous pain brought into my life. But continuation, that's about responsibility. That's about boundaries. That's about deciding who gets a front row seat in your world, and who doesn't. Let me share a story. I once knew a woman named Sarah. She was in her late 50s, kind, patient, the kind of soul who made you feel safe just by being in the room. Sarah had a sister, younger by a few years, who had a lifelong pattern of manipulation. Borrowing money, spreading private stories, disappearing during times of need, and reappearing when things were going well. Sarah forgave her over and over again. She'd say, she's family. She's had a hard life, and I get that. Many of us do. But over time, Sarah's health began to suffer. Her energy dimmed. She stopped opening up to others, afraid they'd weaponize her vulnerability, just like her sister had done. One day, Sarah said to me, I don't hate her. I honestly don't. But I can't let her keep walking through my life like a wrecking ball, just because we share blood. That was the day Sarah forgave and closed the door. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity, with peace. She sent her sister a message that simply said, I love you. I forgive everything. But I can't continue the relationship unless you're willing to grow too. And her sister didn't reply. And that silence. It was the most honest response of all. You see, real forgiveness isn't a performance. It doesn't require applause. It doesn't even need acknowledgement. It's an internal process. Quiet, personal, sacred, but continuation. That requires evidence of change. Let's bring in a bit of science here. Clinical psychology and trauma. Research showed that repetition reinforces identity. In other words, the more you tolerate certain behavior, the more your brain wires it in as normal. That's the danger of confusing forgiveness with unlimited access. You begin to teach your nervous system that being mistreated is something to be accepted, even expected. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." But here's the thing, not everyone seeks truth. Some people seek convenience, control, comfort, and if your forgiveness makes their life easier, they'll ask for it again and again, without changing a single thing. That's where boundaries come in. Boundaries are not barriers. They're bridges between you and your peace. They are declarations that say, I love myself enough to choose who gets to stay in my world. And let me say this gently, but firmly. Choosing to end a relationship after forgiveness is not bitterness, it's wisdom. You are not cruel for refusing to hand your trust back to someone who shattered it. You are not petty for needing distance from someone who refuses to own their impact. You are not wrong for protecting your joy like it matters, because it does. I know, this is hard, especially if you were raised to believe that loyalty means endless tolerance, especially if you were taught that good people always take the high road, even when it leads straight off a cliff. But here's what I've learned. The high road has guardrails. They're called boundaries, and they're built with experience. So, if you've forgiven someone, truly, deeply, and yet something inside still feels unsettled, that's not unforgiveness. That's intuition. That's your soul saying, I need more than words. I need change. I need truth. Listen to that voice, because at the end of the day, your peace isn't selfish. It's sacred. And anyone who demands access to your life without accountability doesn't deserve a seat at your table, no matter how many apologies they send your way. So, forgive. Absolutely. Let go of the poison, the pain, the past. But when it comes to letting someone back in, make sure they've done the work. Make sure they've earned it. And if they haven't, you can still love them. You can still wish them well. You can still pray for their healing. But you do it from a distance, because your healing matters too. And now, let's talk about something that many people sense, but rarely say out loud. Patterns of disrespect are rarely accidental. That might sound harsh, but I want you to really sit with that thought. I know it's tempting to believe that the people who hurt us are just stressed, overwhelmed, or misunderstood, and sometimes that's true. We all mess up. We all say things we regret. But what happens when the same hurt keeps happening again and again? What if it's not a mistake anymore, but a message? Let me tell you a story. There was a man I once spoke with, let's call him David. He was in his early 60s, a gentle, loyal soul who'd been married for over 30 years. His wife Julia had a sharp tongue, always had, but over the years, her comments became more biting, more public, more cruel. At family dinners, she'd mock his memory. At church, she'd interrupt him mid-sentence with eye rolls. When he tried to bring it up, she'd say, "Don't be so sensitive." So he'd stay quiet. For decades. Until one day, during a session, David said something that stopped me in my tracks. He whispered, "I used to think she didn't realize how much it hurt. Now I think she knows. And just doesn't care." That was the moment. The click. That quiet shift when you stop making excuses and start seeing patterns. Because here's the hard truth. Some people know exactly where your wounds are, and they keep poking them, not by accident, but by habit. Not because they're evil, but because it works. Psychology calls this reinforcement. Behavior that gets rewarded with silence, with forgiveness, with access, gets repeated. Like a child who throws a tantrum and still gets the toy. The tantrum doesn't stop. It grows. And in adult relationships, the tantrums look different. They show up as sarcasm, manipulation, withdrawal, guilt-tripping. But the cycle is the same. Hurt gives minimize, gives charm, gives repeat. Let me ask you, have you ever left a conversation feeling drained, confused, or just smaller? That's not a coincidence. That's not poor communication. That's a pattern. And the more you excuse it, the more it becomes your reality. Now, the Stoics, those wise old philosophers we keep turning back to, believed that pain doesn't come from the thing itself, but from our refusal to see it clearly. Marcus Aurelius said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In other words, if we keep calling poison medicine, we'll keep getting sicker. So what can we do? First, name it. Write it down. Not to hold a grudge, but to hold clarity. Because when patterns are visible, they're breakable. And second, trust your body. Your stomach tightens for a reason. Your energy dips around certain people for a reason. Your soul recoils when you're being disrespected, and that's not overreaction. That's wisdom. You don't need a final betrayal to prove it's real. You just need the courage to believe what you've already felt. And when you do, you stop waiting for another apology and start building the boundary that should have been there all along. Up next, we'll explore how setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's an act of self-worth, and how, without them, your brain, your beautiful, adaptable brain, will start treating disrespect like home. Don't go anywhere. You need to hear this. Let's get really honest here. There's something incredibly dangerous about letting people cross your boundaries without consequence, especially when it becomes a pattern. Because when you do, you're not just tolerating the behavior, you're teaching them. You're teaching them that it's okay. You're teaching them that hurting you has no cost. You're teaching them, even without a single word, that they can do it again. I once heard someone say, people don't learn from what you say. They learn from what you allow. And the more I listen to people's stories, the more I believe that's true. Let me share one of those stories. Her name was Linda, a soft-spoken retired teacher in her late 60s. Her son, we'll call him Eric, was charming, intelligent, but deeply entitled. Over the years, Eric had borrowed money, missed birthdays, made promises he didn't keep. And every time he came back with a story and a smile, Linda let it slide. Why? Because she loved him. Because he was her son. Because she thought, if I set a boundary, I'll lose him. But what she didn't realize was, she was already losing herself. Over time, Eric's requests became demands. His language sharper. His absence colder when she said no. And when she finally told him she couldn't help financially anymore, he didn't speak to her for 4 months. You'd think that hurt her most. But what broke her was this realization. I taught him that love meant never being held accountable. And I get it. I really do. Especially for those of us who were raised to be nice, to avoid conflict, to choose peace over power. But sometimes, that peace is fake. It's surface deep. And underneath it, resentment grows like mold. Here's the thing. Humans are incredibly adaptive. We learn by what works. A child touches a hot stove once and learns never to do it again. That's how pain teaches wisdom. But adults, especially those who manipulate, they learn just as fast. When bad behavior still gets them what they want. No pushback, no resistance, no consequence. Perfect conditions to repeat. And here's the hardest part. People don't repeat bad behavior because they're evil. They repeat it because it works. That's it. It gets them attention, or control, or access, or silence. So when you stay silent, hoping they'll change, you're not giving them grace. You're giving them a green light. But I want you to hear this. Boundaries don't ruin relationships. They reveal them. If someone truly cares about you, if they value your connection, they will rise to meet your boundary. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not instantly, but they will try. But if they guilt you, gaslight you, or say, wow, you've changed, like it's an accusation, then what they're really saying is, I miss the version of you I could walk over. And that version of you, that's not your highest self. That's your survival self. The version who learned to shrink, to stay safe. The version who learned to keep the peace even when it broke you. But not anymore. Because the longer you delay consequences, the louder the disrespect gets. It shows up in small things. First, a missed call, a snide comment, a forgotten promise. Then it grows. And one day you look in the mirror and wonder how someone else's behavior became the blueprint for your emotional life. You deserve better. And it starts with one powerful truth. Forgiveness is free. Access is earned, so let them earn it. Let your silence teach what your words never could. Let your distance become the mirror they never wanted to look into. And if they don't learn, that's your answer. Up next, we're going to talk about self-worth. How your brain actually rewires itself when you let people cross your boundaries too many times, and what you can do to reverse the damage. This one is personal. You'll want to stay with me. Let's talk about something we don't hear often enough, especially for those of us who grew up believing that love means always saying yes. Your boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They are not walls to shut people out. They are doors, with locks and keys, to guard what's most precious inside you. Your peace, your energy, your sense of self-worth. I want to take you into something that science and life both teach us clearly, even if we don't always want to see it. Your brain. Yes, that incredible, powerful brain physically rewires itself based on repeated emotional experiences. It's called neuro. It means that what happens to you, especially what you allow, can shape how you see yourself over time. So what does that mean in real life? It means that every time someone crosses a line and you say nothing, every time you tell yourself, it's not that bad, or they didn't mean it, every time you stay silent for the sake of peace, your brain takes notes. It starts to say, okay, I guess this is normal. I guess my feelings don't matter that much. I guess I deserve this. And that, my friend, is how self-worth erodes. Not in one big explosion, but in quiet, invisible compromises. I once spoke with a woman named Elise, a nurse in her early 50s. She was the kind of person everyone leaned on. Always kind, always available. But over the years, her relationships had taken a toll. Her partner dismissed her feelings. Her adult children called only when they needed something. Her coworkers dumped tasks on her without asking. She smiled through it all, until one day, she didn't. She told me. I realized I was the emergency contact for everyone else's life, but no one showed up for mine. What she described next broke my heart. But it's not uncommon. She said she didn't even recognize herself anymore. Not because she changed, but because she slowly disappeared inside everyone else's needs. And do you know what helped her begin to heal? One small sentence. One firm, quiet boundary. She said, I love you, but if you keep talking to me that way, I'm ending the conversation. That one act didn't just protect her from more pain. It reminded her who she was. You see, when you set a boundary, you're not being cold. You're not being cruel. You're standing in front of yourself and saying, I matter. Let that sink in. You matter. Your time matters. Your energy matters. Your mental space matters. And anyone who gets access to those things should treat them like the gifts they are, not the entitlements they demand. Now, I know what you're thinking. But what if they think I'm too harsh? What if they get angry? What if I lose them? Those are real fears. But here's a hard and holy truth. If someone leaves you because you finally respected yourself, they were never really with you. They were with the version of you who didn't have boundaries. And that version can't survive anymore. We grow, we rise, we evolve. And our relationships must evolve with us, or fall away. Because let's be clear, boundaries are not punishments. They're clarity. They're how we say, this is what love looks like for me now. This is what respect feels like now. And if you can't meet me here, that's okay, but I won't lower myself to meet you back there. So today, if your heart is pounding, if you're thinking of a relationship where your self-worth has slowly been chipped away, if you've been afraid to draw that line, let me remind you of something simple, but powerful. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say enough. You are allowed to protect your light. And anyone who makes you feel guilty for that doesn't belong in the front row of your life. In the next part, we'll talk about something that's often misunderstood, especially by people with big hearts. Why enabling isn't compassion. It's time to stop confusing patience with permission. and start reclaiming the power of truth. Let's pause and talk about something tender, something messy, something that kind-hearted people, maybe people like you, often struggle with deeply. Enabling is not compassion. And I know that might sound hard to hear, because when we love someone, especially someone who's hurting, struggling, or lost, our instinct is to help, to protect, to soften the blow. But here's the truth I've learned, both in stories and in real life. Sometimes the pain in a relationship isn't just what the other person is doing to you, it's what you keep allowing. I once sat with a man named Charles. He was a retired firefighter, tough on the outside, but quietly tender underneath. His adult son had struggled for years with addiction and entitlement. Charles kept bailing him out emotionally, financially, even legally. He told me, if I don't help him, who will? And I asked him, what if your help is actually making it worse? That question landed like a brick, because no one had ever said it out loud before. Not even Charles. C. Enabling doesn't look evil. It looks like love. It sounds like he's just going through a rough time, or she's family. I can't say no, or maybe if I keep being patient, they'll finally see. But what it really is this: cleaning up someone else's mess so they never have to face the truth of their own actions. It's stepping in between them and the consequences they desperately need in order to grow. And when you do that, even with the best intentions, what you're really saying is, I don't believe you can handle the full weight of your own life. Now, I know you might say, but isn't that love? Let's make a distinction. Love supports. Enabling shields. Love tells the truth. Enabling avoids it. Love says, I believe in you. Enabling says, you can't survive without me. And that belief, or lack of it, shapes everything. The Stoics believe that pain has a purpose, that struggle can be a teacher. But if we keep rescuing someone from the discomfort that should shape them, we rob them of their own wisdom. Imagine someone is slowly poisoning themselves drip by drip, and instead of taking away the poison, you keep treating the symptoms. You give them medicine. You cover for them. You tell others, they're fine. But they're not. That's what emotional enabling is. It doesn't heal. It hides. It prolongs the cycle. Let me ask you something. Has your compassion ever left you exhausted? Have you ever helped someone so many times that you started losing pieces of yourself along the way? If you've been there, I see you. You're not weak. You're not naive. You're not foolish. You're generous. But generosity without boundaries becomes self-erasure. It becomes the kind of compassion that doesn't help anyone, not you, and not them. Because what we allow is what will continue. So what's the alternative? Consequences. And no, I don't mean punishment. This isn't about revenge or payback. Consequences are not about making someone hurt. They're about showing someone the mirror. They're about saying, this is what happens when this behavior continues. If someone lies, the consequence is you stop trusting them. If they violate your time, you stop prioritizing theirs. If they disrespect you, you pull back, not to punish, but to protect. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And if someone truly wants to grow, they'll meet you in that clarity. They'll face the discomfort. They'll sit with the silence. They'll earn back the space they lost. But if they push back, if they guilt you, or beg you to drop your boundary, or accuse you of being cold, that's not love talking. That's control losing its grip. So today, I want to offer you a gentle but powerful shift. Stop confusing enabling with kindness. Start seeing boundaries as the deepest form of love for yourself and for them. Because sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is say no more. Next, we're going to explore what it really means to reclaim your power and how peace isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make, one boundary at a time. We'll go deeper into the emotional cost of letting others write the rules in your life and how to finally take the pen back. This next part is about freedom. Don't miss it. Let's take a breath. This part is quiet, but it's the one that changes everything. Because when we talk about reclaiming power, we're not talking about shouting louder. We're not talking about winning arguments or getting the last word. We're talking about remembering who you are. I want you to picture something. You're sitting in a room you've lived in for years, and little by little, someone else starts moving things around. Your favorite chair gets pushed to the corner. The windows stay closed. The music you love stops playing. You stop inviting people in because it doesn't feel like your space anymore. One day, you look around and realize, this doesn't feel like home, and I'm the one who lives here. That's what happens when you let someone else's chaos take up too much space in your life. It doesn't always start big. It's subtle, a decision you didn't make, a voice you stopped using, a piece you used to know, now replaced with a quiet anxiety that never fully leaves. Have you ever walked on eggshells in your own life? If you have, I want you to know, that's not peace. That's survival. I met someone once, Carl. He was in his early 70s, a widower, soft-spoken and thoughtful. His son started showing up more often after Carl's health declined. At first, it felt like care, help with errands, help with bills. But slowly, Carl's world began to shrink. His son started controlling who could visit, what could be spent, even what Carl could say. And Carl didn't fight it, not because he agreed, but because he was afraid of losing the relationship. He told me, I thought silence was the safest way to keep the peace. But what he didn't see was that he had already lost the peace the moment he stopped choosing himself. You see, when you give someone access to your life without boundaries, they don't just take space, they take shape in your mind. Their mood becomes your weather. Their opinion becomes your mirror, and their validation becomes your oxygen. That's not love. That's disappearance. But here's the good news. You can come home to yourself again, and it doesn't take a war. Sometimes, it starts with the smallest act of courage, saying, no, that's not okay with me. You don't need rage. You don't need revenge. You just need clarity and a willingness to stand still, even when guilt comes knocking. Because it will. Guilt often follows boundaries like a shadow. It says things like, am I being too harsh? Or maybe I should give them one more chance. But that guilt doesn't always mean you're wrong. Sometimes, it just means you're breaking a pattern that taught you to abandon yourself for the sake of others. And here's what happens when you stop doing that. Your energy returns. Your sleep gets deeper. Your laughter becomes real again. And one day, you'll look in the mirror and realize that the quiet heaviness you've been carrying, that constant ache of not being okay, it's gone because you came back to yourself. That's what it means to reclaim your power, not to dominate, not to control, but to own your presence. To walk through the world knowing, I get to decide how I am treated, and peace. Peace is the byproduct of that knowing. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of truth. It's the sound of your life when no one else is turning down the volume on who you are. So if today you find yourself tired, not just physically, but soul tired, ask yourself this. What if peace isn't something you chase, but something you choose? Choose it, one no at a time. Choose it, one boundary at a time. Choose it by coming home to the person who's been waiting for you all along. You, in the next section, we'll talk about the uncomfortable but necessary truth. Some people don't change because we've made it too easy for them not to. We'll unpack how recognizing patterns of manipulation and responding with clarity, not confusion, might be the most loving thing you can do for both of you. This next part, it's not easy, but it's essential. There's a cost to staying silent, a slow, invisible cost, one that rarely shows up all at once, but creeps in over time. In the way you shrink when someone raises their voice, or how you laugh off disrespect like it doesn't hurt, even though it does. Suppressing your pain doesn't protect you, it erodes you. And here's the part many of us don't realize until it's already happened. Every time you ignore what hurt you, every time you swallow that lump in your throat and pretend it's no big deal, you're not just sparing the other person's feelings. You're trading in a piece of your own self-worth. I've seen this again and again, especially in people who were raised to be strong, to suck it up, to keep the family together, to keep the peace at any cost. People who learned early on that speaking up makes things worse, that having needs makes you a burden, that being easy to love means being silent, agreeable, low-maintenance. And over time, they forget how to listen to themselves. I once sat with a woman named Meredith. She was in her early 60s, elegant, thoughtful, and utterly exhausted. For years, she had been the peacemaker in her family, the one who absorbed everyone else's chaos. She called it being strong. But the truth, she was disappearing. Quietly, completely. She told me, I don't think I've felt angry in over 20 years. And I said, that's not peace. That's numbness. Because emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, are not enemies, they're messengers. They say, this matters to me. They say, this crossed a line. They say, something's not right here. But when you silence them, when you convince yourself that your pain isn't valid, or that it's somehow noble to absorb mistreatment without flinching, what you're really saying is, my truth is too much. And the more you say that to yourself, the easier it becomes to settle. In relationships, in conversations, in the way you talk to yourself late at night, you start tolerating comments that would have broken your younger self. You start accepting apologies that don't come with change. You start bending so far, you forget how to stand up straight. But I want to offer you something right now, something small, but powerful. You are allowed to name what hurt you, not to dwell, not to stay stuck, but to honor what you've carried, and give yourself permission to set it down. Because healing doesn't begin with pretending. It begins with telling the truth. And here's that truth. You've been hurt, not because you're weak, but because you were open. You cared. You hoped. You stayed longer than you should have. And while that may not have protected you, it's not a reason to be ashamed. It's a reason to heal. And part of healing is learning to listen to the small voice you've been silencing. The one that says, that wasn't okay. The one that whispers, I deserve more than this. That voice, that knowing, is not your enemy. It's your compass. Let it speak again. Because every time you ignore your pain to keep someone else comfortable, you send yourself a message. Their peace matters more than mine. Their comfort is more important than my truth. And if you say that long enough, you forget how to say anything else. But not today. Today, I want you to consider this. What if listening to your pain is the first step back to your power? What if honoring your hurt, not indulging it, not wallowing in it, but seeing it, is what allows you to finally come home to yourself? Because your feelings are not flaws. Your standards are not demands. And your truth, it is not too much. It's exactly what will set you free. Up next, we'll wrap this all together. The final insight on what happens when we stop apologizing for having standards and start living as if peace isn't optional, but required. You're almost there. Let's finish this together. Let's sit with a simple truth, one that often gets twisted by guilt, by fear, or by the voices of people who never respected your boundaries to begin with. Consequences are not revenge. They are reflection. They are not an act of cruelty. They are a mirror, a silent, powerful message that says, this is what your actions created, and I'm no longer absorbing the cost. You see, when you finally say no, when you walk away, when you choose silence over explanation, some people will call it punishment, but it's not. It's reality catching up. Because here's the thing, people don't change because you beg them to. They change if they're capable, because the old strategy stops working. If someone lies, and you keep trusting them, if they disrespect you and you keep showing up, if they cross the line and you just redraw it a little further back, what have they learned? That there is no line. But when you set a boundary and actually follow through, you're not getting even. You're giving them a chance to face themselves. And that is more powerful than any argument. I remember a man named Stephen, mid-50s. His younger brother had taken advantage of him for years, borrowing money, manipulating family dynamics, constantly guilt-tripping him into silence. Stephen would always say, it's not worth the fight. Until one day, he stopped, answering the phone not out of anger, but out of clarity. And what happened? The brother panicked, called everyone, spun the narrative, accused Stephen of being cold, heartless, unforgiving. But Stephen, he didn't engage. He let the silence speak. And when he told me about it later, he said, I finally realized, it's not my job to keep teaching someone who refuses to learn. That's what consequences are. They're not fire, they're light. They don't burn the bridge. They reveal who was never planning to cross it. And look, I know it's uncomfortable. Especially if you've spent a lifetime avoiding conflict. Especially if you grew up believing that being a good person means giving endless chances. But mercy is for the remorseful, not for repeat offenders, who treat your forgiveness like a reset button. There's a difference between grace and enabling. Grace says, I see your humanity, but I still have limits. Enabling says, your comfort matters more than my sanity. So how do you tell the difference? Look at their response to your boundaries. If someone says, I understand, I hurt you, I'll give you space and work to earn back trust, that's remorse. But if they say, you're being dramatic, you're holding a grudge, you're punishing me, that's deflection. That's someone who's not sorry. They're just uncomfortable. And their discomfort, it's not your responsibility. That discomfort is their teacher now, not you. Because true growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the pause, the silence, the space where someone has to sit with what they've done and who they've become. That's the gift of consequences. Not to harm, but to invite truth. So if you've been wondering whether it's too harsh to finally follow through, let me ask you this. What's the cost of not doing it? Another apology with no change. Another night questioning your own instincts. Another round of feeling like you're too much or not enough. You don't need that. You need peace. And peace, real peace, doesn't come from avoiding hard choices. It comes from honoring what you know, even when it's uncomfortable. So, set the boundary. Enforce the consequence. Not because you're cruel, not because you're cold, but because you finally believe what you've always quietly known. You deserve more than to be someone's emotional lesson. In the final part, we'll pull all of this together. The deeper truth about dignity, peace, and why the standards you hold are not just personal, they're powerful. Let's finish strong. So here we are. We've walked through pain, through silence, through the quiet aching places where boundaries were crossed, and nothing was said, and maybe, along the way, something clicked inside you, not with anger, but with clarity, because the message underneath every word we've shared today is simple, but life-changing. Your peace is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. Your boundaries are not burdens. They are the blueprint of your self-respect. And consequences. They are not cruelty, they are truth in action. You see, the ancient Stoics understood something we're just beginning to reclaim in the modern world, that we cannot control the behavior of others, only how we respond to it. But that response, it is everything. Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength is what we've been building here, because forgiveness without accountability is self-erasure. Kindness without boundaries is surrender. And compassion without clarity, that's just quiet self-destruction, dressed up as virtue. So if you've spent a lifetime choosing peace at the cost of your dignity, if you've silenced your instincts to keep the relationship, if you've learned to call your numbness resilience, I want you to know that it's not too late to come back to yourself, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with the quiet, steady voice that says, this ends here, and I begin again. You are not here to endlessly forgive people who refuse to grow. You are not here to make everyone else comfortable at the expense of your soul. You are here to live fully, freely, and honestly, even if that honesty makes others uncomfortable. That is the Stoic way. Not cold, not emotionless, but grounded, discerning, and fiercely compassionate, starting with yourself. So today, I want to leave you with a question that Stoics have asked for centuries. If nothing about them ever changes, what must I do to protect my peace? Let that be your compass. Let it guide you away from apology and toward alignment. Let it lead you not into conflict, but into clarity. Let it help you remember, peace isn't the absence of discomfort, it's the presence of integrity. If this message resonated with you, I want to invite you to do one simple thing. Subscribe to this channel, not for the numbers, not for the algorithm, but because if you felt seen here, truly seen, then you are not alone. You've just found a space where people like you are waking up, reclaiming their strength, and choosing to live by principles, not pressure. Join us, this growing community of souls committed to Stoic thought, emotional clarity, and personal freedom, because together, we're not just healing, we're rising with wisdom, with grace, and with the kind of inner stillness that no one can take away. This is your moment. Let it change you. And let's keep walking forward, one honest boundary, one powerful truth, one peaceful decision at a time. I'll see you in the next video.